So an emotional reunion for former hostages and their loved ones as they meet face to face for the first time in over 2 years, thanks to the deal brokered by President Trump.
And we now know the names of the two of the deceased hostages brought back to Israel yesterday.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. A joyous day as 20 living hostages were released from Hamas captivity. Also, the bodies of 4 others returned to Israel for a proper burial. We have gotten the names from the Israeli military of 2 of those hostages who were returned in coffins. Bipin Joshi from Nepal, he was working near the border during the October 7th massacre, and Guy Iluz, who was a sound technician attending the Nova Music Festival. Overnight, President Trump wrapped up his trip to the Middle East with a summit in Egypt where he signed the Gaza ceasefire deal that allowed the release of these hostages. It was a day of celebration on Monday with so many reunions, former hostages meeting their families again after more than 2 years. We do expect to get more updates on their health conditions today from local hospitals. With 20 living hostages freed from Hamas captivity, negotiators are expected to immediately start working on phase 2 of the agreement. President Trump told me he's confident it's going to work out fine.
I'd like to talk about phase 2 of the deal. Already Hamas has said they're not willing to disarm. What leverage do you have over Hamas at this point?
We have a lot of leverage over them, and the countries that would back them or had backed them in the past are not going to be doing it any further. And I think they want peace also. They've gone through hell. You know, there have been 70,000 killed of them. And they rebuild and they regrow, but it's not easy. And I think they probably say, we don't want this anymore. Look, they agreed to this. They agreed to the terms. So they'd be going against the terms of the agreement. So I think it's going to work out fine. Maybe you're going to have to be a little bit strong about it, or maybe not. But they've agreed to disarm, and they've agreed to other things also.
Inside Gaza, Palestinians continue to return to their homes in the north. A surge of aid and supplies expected to reach those civilians as part of this agreement. You can see in this video here some of the Palestinian prisoners that were freed in this broader deal. The big question remains what comes next. But for now, again, phase 2 is very close. And according to the president, they are working out the details of it now. Guys?
You know, Trey, I'm curious because you've been to Gaza, you've interviewed members of Hamas before. What is the current mood when it comes to the public? I saw the Trump signs and screaming Trump. Are the people rejecting Hamas now, or do they still have some sort of authority over the people?
It's a great question, and it's a really challenging situation right now for Palestinians inside Gaza. Remember, there's more than 2 million people that live there, and President Trump, during our interview yesterday, said he saw the images of Palestinians returning to their homes in the northern part of the enclave, and he said he could see on their faces they're good people, but they're still under partial control of Hamas. And we've seen Hamas just in the past 48 hours crack down on people they accused of working with the Israelis or even opposing them during the war. We've seen videos of executions of civilians over the past 2 days inside Gaza. And so until Hamas lays down their weapons and disarms, it's not only a problem for Israel, but also for the Palestinian people.
Trey, let's talk about the tunnels, because senior IDF commanders are saying that you have to dismantle Hamas's terror tunnels under Gaza. They call it the Gaza Metro. It contains 310 miles of tunnels, half the length of New York's subway system. They're built, as we know, under hospitals, under schools, under civilian areas, and this is where they stockpile weapons and bombs. How are they going to get rid of these tunnels? How do you even get in there when we're not as knowledgeable, or Israel's not as knowledgeable about the area?
Yeah, absolutely. We've reported from some of these tunnels beneath the Gaza Strip, and many of them go 60 or 70 feet underground. And while the Israelis used airstrikes to dismantle much of this tunnel network, especially in the northern part of Gaza, we have to look at the reality of the situation, and that is that Israeli forces did not enter some of the central areas of the Gaza Strip, including the Deir al-Balah area of central Gaza. And we know that there are tunnels there that have not yet been touched. And so Israel still has a long road ahead. The easy way out here is Hamas laying down their weapons, disarming and leaving Gaza as part of this Trump administration peace plan. But if they refuse to do so and this war sparks up again, the Israelis will likely re-enter some of these areas of Gaza where there still is a tunnel network. And so it's a long road ahead. But for right now, the ceasefire is holding and the war is over.
Obviously, Trey, Hamas is behind the eight ball so far on returning some of the deceased bodies. What are the logistics involved in that, and what might we expect in terms of getting more of those bodies released as promised?
The logistics are quite complicated. There are still 24 bodies of hostages being held by the terrorist group inside Gaza. And there are some reports in Palestinian media today that I read that indicate more bodies may be released today. But the bottom line here is they have to actually find where they're located. Some of them were held in tunnels. Others were buried in locations across Gaza. And so as part of this Trump administration ceasefire deal, one of the line items actually indicates that there will be an international coalition. And this will not only involve possibly people on the ground inside Gaza, but also extensive intelligence work to try to identify where these bodies are located and facilitate their return to Israel.
Will Gaza allow the intelligence individuals to go into their area to look for these people?
It's a great question, and that's why I asked President Trump that question yesterday during our interview, whether or not he thinks phase 2 will actually succeed. And he's confident that it will. He says that the Americans still have leverage over Hamas, and he said they agreed to the terms of this deal. And so if they don't release the bodies, they will be in violation of President Trump's ceasefire agreement.
Wow. Excellent reporting, Trey. You were there on day one, and it's so great to see an end to all of this and the hostages back home. Excellent reporting. Stay safe out there.
Thank you, Trey.
You've done a great job, Trey. There are a lot of Trump critics that have actually been praising this peace deal and praising the work that he's done. In fact, Time magazine, look at the cover. It says his triumph with a picture of Donald Trump. And then some Democrats, Lawrence, have been praising President Trump for the peace deal as well. I
was shocked by this. You got Chuck Schumer, who says, I commend the enormous advocacy of the tireless hostage families, President Trump, his administration, and all who helped make this moment happen. Kamala Harris said that I commend the leaders and partners whose efforts made this agreement possible, including the president and his team. And then Bill Clinton said, President Trump and his administration, Qatar, and other regional actors deserve a great credit for keeping everyone engaged until the agreement was reached. Charlie.
And then former Secretary of State and former First Lady Hillary Clinton also had this to say.
It's a really significant first step, and I really commend President Trump and his administration, as well as Arab leaders in the region.
But of course, that's not to say that all Democrats were ready with appropriate praise for President Trump. You had some that were either silent or trying to give credit to the previous administration, to Joe Biden, claiming that he deserved credit. Former President Biden posting on X, the road to this deal was not easy. My administration worked relentlessly to bring hostages home, get relief to Palestinian civilians, and end the war. I commend President Trump and his team for their work to get a renewed ceasefire deal over the finish line. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett adding about Trump, raising hell at home and then pretending to be the president of peace is diabolical.
Look, hostages came home, and so I think it deserves praise from both sides. A peace deal has been struck. Humanitarian aid will be sent into Gaza. There's a commitment to rebuilding Gaza, so it helps both sides here. Blinken, who was with the Biden administration, posted on X, in part, it's good that President Trump adopted and built on the plan the Biden administration developed. So Donald Trump was asked about that on Air Force One. He said, everyone knows it's a joke. Look, they did such a bad job. This should never have happened. If a decent president were in, you wouldn't have had the Russia-Ukraine war. This is bad policy by Biden and Obama. But then he went on to say this. This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. With the historic agreement we have just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. Together, we have achieved the impossible. Together, we have achieved the impossible.
I want to say I appreciate the Democrats that are reasonable.
Me too.
And acknowledge the obvious. I mean, if you can't acknowledge this, then we're lost. We're just lost. You can't debate issues with those type of people. You can't have civility with those type of people because they just won't acknowledge certain things. So for Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, and Bill Clinton, even the former secretary, you did the right thing. But the talking point that there was a deal in place that they were working on within the Biden administration, and that somehow Donald Trump just finished it off, I just think it's delusional. First of all, they had no plan. They were fighting with Israel. They didn't allow, there was no maximum pressure on Iran, which was a pretext to actually get this deal done. There was no relationship with the Muslim and Arab world. There was a lot of appeasement. So all the tenets of this deal came from this administration, and all reasonable observers can see that, Charlie.
And then, of course, there's a middle ground of Democrats who are just not saying anything about any of it after having spent years talking about wanting the hostages released, talking about wanting peace in the Middle East, peace, an end, a ceasefire, the ceasefire crew, AOC, who's very, very popular on the internet, a real social media star. She loved, and granted, give her credit, she's on vacation with since Democrats shut down the government, so maybe she just is away from her Twitter handle. But she's always quick to go to Twitter to attack Trump. She knows his name. And I think it's kind of interesting, the last time she was on Twitter to talk about any of this was to condemn the Trump administration for not helping some flotilla that was on its way to Gaza. And you look at that and you kind of wonder, especially when you see the scenes that played out at the Knesset yesterday and in Egypt yesterday, you have a serious group of people. You have a serious president doing serious things, and you have all of these ridiculous people who love to talk about Donald Trump, but they're just completely fundamentally unserious.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me, what we're seeing of them praising Donald Trump reminds me of our grandparents' generation, where you could be a Democrat or you could be a Republican, you could praise the other side when you saw something good. But this is a far cry from what we saw during the State of the Union address, when the Democrats didn't even stand for two families who lost their little children killed by illegal immigrants. Remember, they didn't stand for the little boy who wanted to be an honorary police officer who has cancer. So hats off to these leaders in the Democratic Party.
More than they like America.
Exactly. But I was glad to see a shift, at least for some of them.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.